Hey everyone, and welcome into this week's adventure. I am pretty pumped today just because I came out here wanting exactly this type of weather. It's very damp, it's very wet, it's gloomy, it's misty, but we're right at the edge of spring and color has just started to pop here. And I love getting out in this just really early kind of spring just because it's still cool. You can get out without sweating in the humidity of the southern weather in the United States. And one of the things I love about spring color as opposed to fall color is that when it gets really early on in the season, you have a very distinct few amount of the leaves that start coming out and they're just this vibrant color. And all around me, everything's pretty dead still around here. You do have some buds coming out on the trees, but as I was driving here, there were a lot of trees that were just sprouting out that were just this vibrant, amazing color that I want to photograph later today. And we will get to that. But I wanted to start today at this location, and it's a waterfall location. And it's one that I've only been to one time before. I didn't have a lot of luck, but since it's been so rainy lately and everything is just so damp and the water level is so high, you just have tons of water that's coming off of the ground right now that makes today just perfect for shooting. So I have a wide angle lens. I also have a circular polarizer here that I'm going to be using, but there really are these two types of landscape photographs. And the first type is that type that you go out searching for. And that's this first shot that we're going to be getting right now that you plan for, that you kind of know what to expect when you go out. And that's that waterfall shot that we're going to get this morning. But there are also those shots that you really like use photo pills to plan out your shot months in advance. You know what you're going to get. And those are the type of shots that come out well, but I don't get that excited about. I'm hoping that today we get really rewarded with a great waterfall shot here. So I'm gonna bring you guys along with me. Let's go. So I came down here to this waterfall knowing what it was gonna look like before I even got here, because number one, I've been here before. Number two, I've done a lot of research on, other shots that have been photographed here. And kind of the main shot that is the one you see behind me. And it's just that big wide shot of the waterfall. But I kind of want to steer you away from going that route because that is the main shot. And it's easy to go to a location like this, especially after you have like one of those photographs that's in your mind and that's the one composition that you've seen. So when you get there, that is kind of what you see and how you frame your shot up. But I would challenge you to go the opposite direction of going and looking at that. And it's okay to take that shot initially, but working around that whole waterfall, because one of the things when you are shooting wide on a waterfall with a wide angle lens, like I'll probably be shooting with my 17 to 28 f2.8 Tamron lens, is when you're shooting that wide, you have more than just foregrounds at the bottom. You have foregrounds on the side that are coming in, you have foregrounds at the top of any limbs that are coming in. So you really want to be mindful of everything that's going on within this frame. Behind me, you see the waterfall itself. Yeah, that's the main subject, but how do you frame it up with complementary subjects kind of going around that? And that's kind of what I'm struggling with right now, is finding little spots around it. And one of the main takeaways here is if there's not one there, just don't force it. So while I do initially look for a foreground and kind of try to find something that will add some interest to the composition, I don't want to just shove it in there and force it into the frame just because that's what I was going for. I want to be mindful of maybe the less clutter, the better. So I kind of want to take you guys around and show you what I'm talking about here with this waterfall. So if I turn you around, you can see kind of what I'm talking about here. So there are a lot of limbs right at the bottom of this waterfall. And when you get that, you do get some pretty cool foregrounds that go through the frame and lead you directly up to the water itself. But I want you to be aware, if you look down in here, once you get into the editing process, like there's a lot of clutter in this foreground. So it might not be a good idea on second thought to include that within your frame. Now, if you step up a little bit, what happens is you get another set of these roots that go through. They do still have some clutter, like some dead leaves that are stuck in there, but it might be a much cleaner composition to get. Now, thirdly, if we continue moving around this waterfall, what you can get are some simplistic limbs that may lead you into the frame a little bit better. So coming around here, using these logs as foregrounds can get in that too. But when you are lastly getting this shot in place, I do want to encourage you to look for those side foregrounds that kind of take you from the bottom corner all the way through up to the top of the waterfall here, and then just having this serene water down in your foreground as negative space. So you're really working with various subjects, framing up, kind of looking for different compositions that you can get. So when you do get out here and shoot something, you're not disappointed when you get into post-processing later and you're like, man, there's a lot of clutter in this shot. I don't really know if that's the best way to frame it up. So right now, what I'm struggling with is finding that composition. And it may take some time, but on cloudy days like this, you have time. You know, we have diffuse light all day long. We're not really rushed to get to a very specific shot. So it's good to play around and try to whittle down what in the frame is clutter and what's not, what's necessary to the shot and what's not. So that's kind of what I'm dealing with here as we try to continue go around and frame up this waterfall best. All right, so I did just walk all the way around this waterfall a few different times. And what I like to do is just not have the camera on a tripod and just frame it up both horizontally and vertically and just kind of walk around and see which compositions work best. Now, I did find a composition that I really like that's up here that I'm gonna take you guys up there to. I'm not gonna take my camera bag. It is a little bit of a precarious spot, so getting the camera that you're watching on balanced and in the right position where you can see what I'm doing, and then also getting my tripod in position is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I'll explain what I'm doing once I do actually get up there. So I think this is just the best it's going to be from this point. Now, I did just climb up here to try to get you in the right position to see where I am 2 times to get that camera there and this camera here, and then realized there was a trail right over there with some neat steps and everything. So such is life. But I want to kind of take you through what I'm doing here. So I'm shooting with a circular polarizer on the end of my lens. Now, with being this close to the waterfall, I also have this air blaster, and what I'm going to do as I'm shooting, to make sure there's no water droplets that get on the end of my lens, I'm just gonna blow to the side to get all those water droplets off, because there's some spray coming off the waterfall. But I'm actually gonna do 2 different shots here and blend them together. So I'll probably do a multiple exposure for all these rocks here and a much quicker exposure, because when you get a lot of plant life like this on the edges of your frame, you can miss that they're kind of moving around with the wind that's coming off of the waterfall. So what I like to do is do 2 different exposures, one with a fast shutter speed to really freeze that plant life, and then blend that into the slower shutter speed of the waterfall itself. So for the waterfall itself, it'll be a much darker exposure, a slower shutter speed, but I am gonna darken it up using a polarizer. And what that's gonna do is just get me a very like moody scene and try to eliminate any of this bright sky that you see above us, and just try to get a lot of the rocks here and a lot of the water itself in the frame, and really fill the frame with the darkest parts of the scene, so you don't have that high contrast look of bright sky and then kind of darker shadow tones down below, and just get a much more consistent shot throughout the frame, but also using all these rocks over here to the side as leading lines through the entire frame and pulling you into that waterfall from the left side. You know, sometimes when I am out in weird situations like that, like I do feel like I could possibly pass as a yoga instructor in some of the predicaments that I get in and stances that I take to get the different compositions, but it's all worth it. Like getting down low at that steep angle up on that hill up there to the side, I mean, it's so much better of a view because you do occlude that sky and just get the waterfall itself and all the darkness that is. Because it's really like a dark, moody scene that we're photographing here today. But there are a lot of cool things like on this trail that I kind of want to show you guys. They're not really great photographs per se, but there are a lot of like cool little scenes that you can see as we're hiking out. So I did want to show you guys those, maybe just like in a short video montage. And then we're gonna get to a different type of photograph. I'm probably gonna switch my lenses out and go to a 70-200 to really frame up some of this spring color that's starting to bust out of the dark, damp forest that's completely dead, except for a few short sprigs of spring color. It is getting hot. The second type of photograph that I want to shoot today, and that's the second main type, is that photograph that you just happen upon. And it's one of those serendipitous moments of seeing something, pulling off to the side of the road and just photographing it. It's one of those shots where you pass it on the road and you just see it. There's no hiking involved. You can roll down your window on your car and photograph it straight from there. And that's really one of the types that I like most, is just stumbling upon something that you see as you're driving by, or you stumble upon something on the trail that you didn't expect to find there when you were hiking to like a big overlook location or something like that. Those are my favorite types of photographs to find. And as I was driving in, I was noticing a lot of spring color, and I was mentally marking the mile markers along this road. in my mind of the places that I wanted to go back and stop and see if I could get a snapshot there. And there are some difficulties along that trail of getting these serendipitous shots and just finding these moments, because a lot of times you don't have that space to work. Like we talked about working around the entire scene of the waterfall, but like when you just pull off to the side of the road, you don't always have space to stop and get a good composition. So there's some challenges there that we're going to work through once we do find our spot and get set up and start photographing. So I'll probably use a 70 to 200 lens when I do get out there and photograph those, just because we're working with more like a compression type, almost abstract type of a photograph. So those are my favorite types. I'm really excited to get up this road and shoot some more. So I just got really excited because I passed literally exactly what I was looking for. I'm gonna cross the road real quick and show you guys, but this is actually just what I was looking for, is this type of thing right here. You just have all these like high contrast points in the spring blooms, and it's just bright white, this cream color. But I'll cross back over the road real quick so you guys can see what I'm talking about as I shoot. But one of the things that I look for when I am doing this is the most important thing of the composition, and that is having a good background. So when you have something like this, it's high contrast, a lot of times the upper levels will bloom first because they're closest to the sun. But a lot of times when you shoot up, you don't get that high contrast that you're looking for with the photograph. When you're shooting down, you're shooting more at the forest floor. So you get separation in color tones between the brighter blooms of spring versus the darker forest floor behind it. So when you're shooting down or even level at eye level, you're not shooting that up and getting those blooms really mixed in with the brighter sky that's overhead. Because even though it's cloudy, as you can see right here, it's still really bright and you don't have that separation of color tones. So basically a abstract shot like this, like you don't have to do a lot of compositional work. You really just have to wait on the cars, of course. But you have to look for opportunities of getting the most contrast and the most lines throughout. And the lines are the limbs of the trees really coming through the frame and getting up to you. So you have basically just this linear path right here on the edge of the road to work with. Always be careful when you're this close to the road, but this is basically all you have. So you just work from one side to the other and try to get a good perspective and line of sight on how you can frame that up best. So what I'm just gonna do is do exactly that. I have my camera with my 70 to 200 lens, and what I'm shooting with now is f4, and I'm shooting at 1/400th of a second and an ISO of 100, getting that really fast shutter speed. But what I'm gonna do is just frame this up to where I have the most amount of focus on these blooms here, and I'm gonna try to throw as much background focus out. I'm just gonna have this path of the tree trunk coming up and really framing this up nice, and that looks pretty good. Now what I want to do is try a couple other different types of shots here and try to get the one I like best. I'm going to use the same settings throughout. I may switch to F8 if I don't like what it's doing with F4, but I do like the sense that it's throwing that background out of focus so that I get the most detail and the most attention brought to the subject of the image, which is the blossoms. Remember, look for that darker background. That's the most important thing to this type of photograph because you want that separation from the main subject of your image. So that's gonna do it for today. I got out here really hopeful about a lot of spring color. We saw some spring color that we were able to get, but for the most part, a lot of the success came with the waterfall. But going through these two types of landscape photography, of preparing for a shot and then getting that serendipitous shot just out of chance, that you see something and you shoot it, are two really good mixes to have in one day. A lot of times I feel like those serendipitous shots are my favorite, but over time what happens is I end up liking those shots that are really planned out and thought out meticulously, like I got at the waterfall, and also blending in an exposure blend into that image too. But one of the things that I do want to leave you with when you are getting those serendipitous shots of something like an abstract shot of spring like we photographed is, don't be afraid to think about crop when you are photographing that, because cropping, like we cropped that shot as a square, a 1:1 ratio, just because that's what really brought out that middle part of the trunk of that tree that came out of the forest and brought all those blooms into the shot. So don't be afraid to think about crop when you are going through and photographing something in the field, kind of envisioning what this image is gonna wind up being. So that does it for this week. If you like this video, be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you can be informed when we go on our adventure next week, or when we work on some other tips that are gonna help you be better at landscape photography.